Hello, YouTube. Okay, I admit it, drama is sometimes interesting. And when the main people involved are people who you know, it becomes that much more interesting. As you can see from the title, I want to talk about the recent and ongoing feud between Sargon of Akkad and Spinosauruskin. Before we begin, I should give full disclosure of my position in this. I consider myself a friend of Spino, and I've met him in person, and I've had communication with him during what's been going on. I also consider myself a fan of Sargon, although I've only spoken to him directly once, and that was very briefly. The other thing, though, is that I haven't watched much of either of their material on YouTube for quite some time. In the past year or so, I haven't had much spare time to devote to YouTube as I used to, so I've just mainly been making my own videos and watching a few other people's videos here and there when I have the time. And I usually only really have the time to watch short videos, unless, of course, the topic really specifically interests me. And for whatever reason, that's led me to watching fewer and fewer videos by both Sargon and Spino. So the crux of the issue here seems to be that Spino, though I guess relatively friendly with Sargon publicly, although Spino will deny this, made a second Twitter account for the purpose of parodying and criticizing Sargon's views. For example, he'd mock Sargon's assertion that he's taking part in a culture war. Sargon, when he discovered this, took it to be a betrayal of trust and a downright horrible thing to do to someone. I've linked to the relevant videos below so you can see how angry Sargon is about this. Sargon considers Spino's actions to be, quote, going behind his back, and because an account critical of Sargon is naturally going to attract people who dislike Sargon, Spino was also consorting with Sargon's, quote, enemies. So from Sargon's perspective, it's easy to see why he's upset. He's part of a major important social movement, and his YouTube channel is his livelihood and his passion, and he sees the people who don't like him as his enemies. Now, I'm not going to judge too harshly the words he chooses to use because I'm not him and I've never had the experience of running a successful YouTube channel for a living. There are probably stresses he's under that the rest of us just don't understand. But that doesn't stop us from critiquing him and judging his behavior. Now, there's more to this. Specifically, there was a passive-aggressive tweet Spino made, and that was featured in Sargon's original video on this. But I think that was just the straw that broke the camel's back. The parody account seems to be what's really got Sargon so bothered. There also apparently is a pattern of behavior involved here. Apparently Spino has been getting worse or more annoying, or a lot of people have been seeing problems with how he's acting, but I haven't really seen that firsthand, so I can't comment on it. Now, from Spino's perspective, he hasn't really done anything wrong. To him, the parody account is just for laughs. He explains his reasons for doing it in his video, also linked below. So this brings up the question, was making the parody account wrong? Sargon certainly thinks so, and Spino doesn't. And to me, I think it does depend largely on your perspective. Is parody just another form of criticism, or is it mean-spirited and intentionally hurtful? It depends on how you think of parody. If you view parody as inherently a form of comedy, then it shouldn't bother you too much. Sargon is upset that the parody account did things like take him out of context or judge him from offhand remarks. These are things that would bother most people, I think. I certainly wouldn't like to have my comments constantly taken out of context and judged harshly. But the second it becomes comedy, it wouldn't bother me much. Since I know the person isn't really being serious, there'd be nothing to be upset over, really. I might get a bit annoyed at times, but it shouldn't be too hard to ignore. And plus there's always the block button if it gets really annoying. But if you view parody as just a screen for serious criticism, then it does become malicious and even harmful at times. If the parody account is just using comedy to make serious arguments, and those arguments are based on intentionally incomplete information, then yeah, that's a shitty thing to do. And that seems to be the main issue here. Spino sees the parody account as just a place to shitpost and make jokes, and Sargon sees it as making serious criticisms of him using faulty information. And if that's all there was to it, there'd be no real conclusion to make because it would depend on how you interpret the tweets made by the parody account. So I took a look at it, and it seems to me mostly to be hyperbolic versions of Sargon's beliefs, taking him out of context for the sake of mockery, poor attempts at gotchas, and sprinkled in there some just actual criticisms of Sargon's genuine beliefs. So my interpretation is that it is indeed clearly meant to be humorous, but it's a mean-spirited kind of humor. It isn't just the kind of jokes you might make at a friend's expense that they might laugh along with. This is the kind of humor you use to mock someone you don't like. And this is where Spino fucked up, in my view. I don't see anything wrong per se with mocking a public figure, and that's exactly what Sargon is. But if you're going to be mocking someone who thinks of you as a friend, it's best to make sure they're not going to be too upset by it. And while Spino was critical of Sargon publicly, he never, to the best of my knowledge, expressed a level of dislike for Sargon equal to that shown in the parody account. As a result, Sargon was shocked to find that Spino was spending time regularly mocking him in the way you'd mock someone you dislike. Sargon probably thought of Spino up until that point as someone who liked him but was just somewhat critical of certain views. And the thing is, Spino did like him. He certainly never hated him, and the parody was, in Spino's words, meant as light-hearted criticism. The issue is what Spino saw as light-hearted criticism, many others, including myself, see as pretty mean-spirited. Also, from Spino's perspective, he was much more scathing of Sargon under his own account than under the parody account, but I don't think Sargon saw it that way. Where Spino made his biggest mistake, though, was he didn't accurately assess how Sargon thought of him and how he'd react to Spino, quote, light-heartedly mocking him. See, some people react worse than others when their friends mock them. I have a close friend like that. When I first met him, I noticed that most of his friends made fun of him a lot. They'd do it because they'd get a reaction from him, and he never really seemed to mind that much. I mean, I took part in the mocking too, because I just thought that's the way this social group interacted. But after I started to get to know him better, I realized that deep down, he didn't really enjoy the mockery at all. So I made a decision to never again participate in mocking him, and suddenly we started getting along really well. He's now one of my closest friends, in large part because he knows I'll never make fun of him. Now, I don't know Sargon on a personal level, but maybe he's the same way. Maybe Sargon just doesn't like it when his friends make fun of him. And beyond that, if when looking at the parody account I see the mockery as mean-spirited, I can only imagine how Sargon sees it. It's totally understandable that he'd be upset by it. After all, as far as he's concerned, here's someone Sargon thought was his friend who was getting together with his worst enemies and making fun of him. That sounds a lot like betrayal to me. And because Spino didn't take this viewpoint into account, he can't really complain that Sargon is unhappy with him. And anyone who shares Sargon's perspective is likely to also be upset with Spino. And that's largely on Spino for misjudging how people are going to interpret his actions. What's not on Spino is this. Sargon, in his video explaining why he's upset, made a point to emphasize how much older and more experienced he is than Spino, and how he used to be exactly like Spino when he was younger. Well, I have to say, he may be older, but I'm not seeing a great deal more wisdom or maturity here. See, Spino's reacting to all of this in a very high school drama sort of way, and I've called him on that. But Spino is 19, so if anyone is going to act like a high school student, it should be a teenager. But Sargon, despite being older and more experienced, decides the best way to deal with this situation is to get in front of a microphone and lambast Spino in front of thousands of people. And I'm not saying Spino didn't deserve it. When you piss off someone with a huge platform, you're taking the risk that they'll use that platform to attack you. But since Sargon's presenting himself as this experienced, older, wise person, surely he should be above this. There was absolutely no reason Sargon needed to make these videos. He could have bitched about Spino to his mates, to his wife. He could have done something to blow off steam, and then if he really felt the need to, he could have made a reasonable, rational video or even a tweet explaining that he was no longer going to associate with Spino. It could have sounded something like this. I want you all to know that I will no longer be speaking to or interacting with Spinosauruskin. It turns out that he had been running a parody account of me, and I consider his actions to be childish and malicious. Simple as that. That could have been an adult way to deal with a disagreement between him and someone acting like a kid. And that's even assuming that there was any need to make this public at all, which I'm not sure there was. See, by making these videos, Sargon hasn't just informed people that he doesn't like Spino anymore. He's publicly encouraged all his viewers to not like Spino either. And I'm not saying he directly told people you should hate Spino. But the way he presented those videos, it made it very difficult for anyone to view Spino in a charitable way. And when you're someone who gets millions of views, that can be a very serious thing. And at the end of the day, even if we take Sargon's perspective as fact, what did Spino really do? He hurt Sargon's feelings, he was mean to him, he was not honest with him, he backstabbed him. But do such actions justify encouraging the level of hatred these videos have done? Spino has made comments on Twitter about being blacklisted. And while I don't think that's the best way to put it, if every fan of Sargon hates you, it's going to have a huge effect on your online presence in this community. It's one thing if Sargon personally just refused to associate with Spino, but by presenting what happened the way he did, Sargon's creating a situation where thousands of people are going to refuse to associate with Spino despite the fact that he's done nothing to hurt any of them. And yes, every member of Sargon's audience has a mind of their own and can make their own decisions, but it's not as if Sargon presented these events in the most even-handed, unbiased way possible. He recorded them angry, and allowed his emotional reaction to color the way he presented what happened. And that's not the way a mature adult would have handled the situation. And as a result of both of these people acting like children, how will this affect everyone else? I mean, I'm friendly with Spino. Am I a bad person too in the eyes of Sargon and anyone who agrees with him? What about anyone who takes Spino's side on this completely? Are they now Sargon's enemies too? See, by making this not only public but emotional, what Sargon has done is turn this from just a personal feud into a group conflict. The way Sargon has presented this situation, there's not really any middle ground anyone can take reasonably. Either Spino is a piece of shit, or Sargon is completely wrong. I mean, go look at the comments in any of the videos I've linked. Almost everyone seems to have chosen a side here. I mean, it's not as if there's not enough already to divide people. Politics, religion, ideology, you name it, there's something that we can divide everyone up on. But no, we need to include petty feuds in there to further divide everyone. Would it really be too much to ask for a leading member of a community to maybe learn some basic conflict management skills and not turn a purely emotional thing into something that affects everyone? So at the end of the day, I think Spino fucked up by misjudging Sargon and how Sargon and others would see his parody account and his other actions. He's not been handling this conflict very well, and he seems to be switching back and forth between attempts at being reasonable and acting like a classic high school student. I do have to say, though, at least his response video to Sargon was made at a time when he wasn't clearly emotionally upset by the situation. What I hope Spino learns from this is that mocking someone's beliefs is not something everyone takes lightly, and if you do it, you risk making them hate you. I don't believe Spino had any malicious intent here, but that doesn't excuse the errors he's made. As for Sargon, what I'd say to him is, grow up, man. If you're going to be a public figure with a huge fan base, you need to learn to deal with personal conflicts better than this. Reacting to Spino the way you did doesn't help anyone. You of all people should know that hate just breeds more hate. And that's my take on this situation. I don't know which side of this issue I'm on, honestly. I think they both fucked up. I'll probably get accused of fence sitting or not being hard enough on Spino or not being hard enough on Sargon. Who knows? I fully admit I don't know everything that happened since I don't religiously follow everything these two people do and say. But based on the 3 videos and the various tweets I've seen, I think I have a pretty good idea of what went wrong here. And I'm also perfectly willing to admit that me being personally closer to Spino might be creating a bias here. I can't be sure. I think I'm judging this as objectively as I can, but I'm only human just like everyone else. If you think I'm being biased here, let me know. And please don't just say you're a biased cuck, fuck you. I mean, point out where I've made mistakes in my reasoning that have caused me to misjudge the situation. I just hope the situation doesn't get any worse than it already is. And until next time, I'm Positive Improvement, and I wish you all the best.